Okay, well, we're going to do the first in a series of a couple of videos here where I'm going to talk about my process of building guitars. And it starts with wood selection. Before I do anything other than just planning the guitar, I'll select the woods that I'm going to use for each individual guitar. And so there's nothing really routine about the woods that I use. I select my woods from exotic hardwoods from around the world. I'm going to be selecting woods for the front of the guitar, woods for the back of the guitar, woods that I'll use for the neck, and the woods that I'll use for the fretboard. And they're all different. So for example, one guitar, I may decide to use a burl. And so I'll buy a big block of wood that you can see outlined on here, basically a guitar shape for burl, which will obviously be the front of the guitar. For the back of the guitars, usually either mahogany, a Honduras mahogany, or sapele. Sapele is very, very similar to mahogany, but I like the sapele a little bit better. It's a little harder, but it's got a sheen to it, an iridescence to it that I really, really love. Quite often for the front of the guitar, I'll use a curly maple, and I'll book match it, which means I'll put this on my bandsaw, slice it down the middle, and then I open the two pieces up, and they'll be joined in the cut there, which is book matching it. Here's another wood that I'm using for the front of the guitar. This is Mexican rosewood or cocobolo. Quite often I'll use what's called an ambrosia maple. Very interesting grain in the maple caused from ambrosia beetles. Here's a piece of the Honduras mahogany. And mahogany comes in lots of variations of color, from a dark reddish brown to a light kind of yellow orange color. Also for the back, I'll use black limba, which is kind of a interesting, pretty wood. There's a big, large chunk. Hopefully you can see the grain and the colors. Black limba is becoming a very popular wood for guitars for either the front or the back or the entire thickness of the solid body guitar. For the necks, I'll basically use either mahogany. That's a pile of neck blanks in mahogany. I've got another one up there that's called ironwood. This is a piece of ironwood. Very, very hard, very dense, very stiff. So it makes a great wood for the necks. Another wood I like to use on the neck is a maple. Either a curly maple, which has kind of like a wave pattern in it, or a flame maple where the wave pattern is much thinner and it gives little rays going across the guitar body. For the fretboard, I'll use almost anything. Basically, I want something that kind of matches or harmonizes the woods in the front of the guitar body. And so I'll pick grains and colors that I like. This is another wood that I'm using for some of the necks. It's a curly cherry, and you can't see the way that the light reflects on it until it gets a finish on it. But you can see the grain pattern, and then it has this kind of iridescence. Cherry makes a good neck wood. Very attractive. I talked about book matching. Here's an interesting wood. It's a zebra wood. It's a very unique type of zebra wood, and you can see how in the joint the grains kind of match each other and go their separate directions as they go out. Some of the woods I like to use on necks or fretboards. Purple heart, very stiff, very hard. Another one is Paduk, which is again, very, very hard, dense, stiff wood. Here's what's called Pau Rosa. It has some really pretty grains and colors from orange to purplish and brown in it. Really a nice, attractive wood that I love using on fretboards. This is a Bolivian rosewood. Some nice grains to it as well. When I need something on the fretboard or on the neck, you can kind of see the general outline of a neck. I'm going to get two necks out of this. This is rambutan, an African hardwood with a kind of yellowish and orange color. I'll kind of plan this out in my mind before I do anything. I'll just think, okay, I want to use a certain wood for the front of the guitar. Sometimes it'll have some unique tonal characteristics that I'll want to either emphasize with the wood on the back of the guitar, Or maybe if I'm using a real bright tone wood on the front, like a real hard maple or some of these other really hard woods, then I may want to add something that's a little warmer tone-wise, like a mahogany or a cedar or a softer maple like the ambrosia maple on the back of the guitar to kind of give it a more complex tone and fill in some of the mid-range that you may be missing from an all-maple guitar, for example. There's no way I can cover all of the woods I use. It's probably 20 or 30 different kinds of woods. Here's some examples of the process of making the guitar. This happens to be a type of burl, which is going to be on the front of the guitar. In this case, I've already cut it to the thickness that I want. On the back of this one, I'm going to be using this wood, which is a cedar. Cedar has a really nice, full, clear sound to it. The next thing I do is I'll do the chambering, and this is before I glue the top to the bottom. This happens to be a book-matched redwood. The back of it is a black limba, and quite often in the backs of the guitars I'll do some stripes just to add a little interest, because the back of the guitar can seem kind of plain even if you have some pretty wood. So I'll just add that for interest. Now these two pieces have already been chambered. This is the chambering that I've done. Chambering does a couple of things. It has an effect on the tonal quality. It gives a brighter, cleaner, clearer sound to the tone, kind of like an acoustic guitar compared to a solid body electric guitar. And another thing that occurs from this is it makes the guitars lighter. And if you're a gigging musician, carrying around a 11 or 12 pound Les Paul around your shoulder and neck for an evening gets so tiring. Believe me, I've had many sore necks from my 12-pound Gibson Les Paul. These guitars, when they're finished, are right around 6 pounds, so it's about half the weight, and it makes a huge difference. The next thing I'll do is in all of the inside, I'll actually put copper foil tape to help reduce any feedback and squealing, interference from lights. Poor wiring in the building that you're playing at can all affect the tone and make it squeal or hum. And the copper tape shields it and keeps all of those interfering electrical impulses out of it. After I get this copper shielding in there is when I glue everything together. You'll notice these little holes in here. That's to line things up so that I get the top and the bottom precisely matched together. And I'll actually take little pins as it fits in there. After I get 4 of them on there, it holds this precisely. It doesn't move a bit, so I can glue it. That's really necessary because once you get the glue in there, it acts like a lubricant, acts like ball bearings, and you go to clamp the two surfaces together and they just start sliding around all over the place. So you have to get those little pins in. Now here's one that's glued together, and you can see the copper foil tape on the inside. And then here in the control cavity. The next step in this process is to do the cove routing on the front, and I'll show you some examples of some finished ones so you know what I'm talking about. I want to show you the types of necks that I do, and I've basically got 2 different designs. One is kind of like a Fender neck. It's just straight and contoured. The Fender guitar necks are stronger than, say, a Gibson neck, but they're a little bit tricky to make. This one you can see has been routed out for a truss rod. All my necks have truss rods in them so they can be adjusted later on down the line if the neck starts warping. I like to do the little stripes on them. This one is actually going to go with this guitar with this fretboard on it. The other type of neck shape that I do is like the Gibson neck, where there's an angle. There's a splice in the neck to create this angle, which is roughly about 15 degrees. That's a good angle to make the break over the string coming over the nut. Here's one that's completed. You can see there's a joint there. One thing that I do that Gibson doesn't do to make that joint stronger is under the fretboard I have another piece of wood, and this happens to be Paduk that just strengthens that joint so it's not going to break. I've got a guitar over here that's just about finished. I just have to do some touch-up polishing on it. You can see the copper foil in there. This has a really unique sapele, but it's a figured sapele. You can see the iridescence in it with the different angle of the light on it. So this is a pretty rare piece. The stripe in here is actually a bird's eye maple. This is the neck that's going to go on that. This is the Fender style neck. It's made of flame maple, 2 different colors of flame maple with a walnut stripe, and ebony. I use ebony for accents on all the guitars and necks. This one is going to be finished with all gold hardware. The frets are also gold. This is what I was talking about, the cove routing that I do to my guitars all around the front. It's something a little unique, a little special, just a little added touch. We've left the shop. Now I'm in my showroom and music room. Anybody that wants to can come in here and try the guitars, play them. I've got set up with a half a dozen different amplifiers and speaker cabinets so they can try them out. Here's a couple of ones that I've done. This one, you can see the flame maple in it. One of my earlier body designs, but this is made with a wood called canary wood. I really love that wood. It's got some really gorgeous colors and grain patterns. I used a Paduk stripe with ebony accents. On the neck, I used Paduk. Instead of using the plastic binding typically used on guitars, on this one, for the neck anyway, I used ebony for a binding and did some accent stripes in the middle using yellow heart and Paduk and ebony. This is a really nice wood. I've used that on several guitars. In the back is a mahogany. This shows a little bit more of the reddish color of typical mahoganies. The neck is the maple.